Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? We'll see if the chat pops up here in just a moment. I am going to be going through the stages of awakening with all of you. This is really cool, and I think it's important for us all to have context and understand what these stages of awakening actually are. You want to know where you fall into each stage of awakening, not necessarily to listen, it's not from being in this hierarchical kind of place like, oh, how far up the ladder am I? It's not about that. I think it's so important to understand that there is purpose within each stage. And no matter where you fall or anyone that you love falls, okay, whether they're in a state or a stage of awareness or awakening that would be deemed as lower or higher, it doesn't matter. All serve a purpose and all here are on different. Remember, you're here on your own individual journey. And although you come here and you awaken to want to serve a higher purpose, it doesn't mean that your journey is here to necessarily serve others in their own awakening. Okay, you are just here to serve on behalf of Source, and your journey may mean that you get to awaken things in other people, but that's not your mission. Your mission is to experience through yourself, okay, and your own connection to Source, and that is an extremely important thing to do. Now, I'm going to go through these different stages of awakening, and I'm going to go through them linearly. However, I actually don't believe that you experience these necessarily only linearly. I believe that you can experience certain stages of awakening at multiple times. So when I say at multiple times, I should be saying multiple stages of awakening at the same time. I think that's quite possible. And I think you can also oscillate. I think you can actually devolve into different states sometimes, and it might be necessary, but it's important to understand what these stages of awakening are. So before I start, I just want to say hi to everyone. Jenny, Stephanie, T, how are you? Jennifer. I hope you like, this is like my AI artwork, because, I love Midjourney, and it's the little, let me just see. I don't know if you can see her. Let me see if I can go this way. There she is. Just representing on the thumbnail here. And so, before we get started and go deeper into what the stages of awakening are, which I want to say, this will be a really good video for anyone, okay? Anyone at any stage that they are along the journey. I've kind of like laid everything out here so that it's not too airy-fairy, it's not too woo-woo. It's really grounded, and it's important because no matter where you are in this process, you need to understand this information in order to understand what your soul is doing in this lifetime to evolve. So I want to say, first, Forbidden Journey almost sold out, the retreat. I'm so excited. If any of you are still interested in coming, I know some of you have emailed me and that you're interested in coming, but I haven't heard back from you. So just know the tickets are starting to sell out and they're almost all gone. So if you're looking to come to the Forbidden Journey retreat, the link is in the description below. If you were interested in coming and you didn't receive the email to sign up and all of that, then reach out to me. Okay, just email me, Nicole at NicoleFrolick.com, and we'll try to get that sorted. Big things are going to be happening at this retreat. I am super excited. I want to really make this a very deeply experiential, ceremonial process for all of you to go through. And I really want you to have a life-changing experience when you're there. So I love to create experiences for people. Like you guys know, especially those of you in Alchemy, when I'm creating the meditations every month, I love to create a journey, an experience, and that's what this is all going to be about. So if you're interested, tickets are still on sale, but I am almost sold out. So make sure we are 5 weeks away. 5 weeks away today from the retreat. So if you're looking to come, tickets are in the description below. If you're needing to work with me one-on-one, links to book with me are also in the description below as well. All right, so let's get into this. Dots, hello from Ireland. Good to see you there. So when it comes to the stages of awakening, there are 3 major stages, which within each stage, I'm going to break them down even further because there are even more stages within each stage. So the first stage is the consensus state, and this state is ruled by the planet Saturn. Saturn is the regulator, the governor. It wants to make rules. It wants to restrict. It wants everything in order. Everything's got to be law-abiding, right? And so this is where, if you're in the consensus state or stage of awakening, this is where you want to play by the rules. This is where you want to conform to society. You are likely going to conform to the society of your birth. You're going to conform to the country of your birth. So your values, your morals, your traditions, cultures, all within that country. This is what is held within the consensus stage of awakening. And this is where your beliefs of what reality is, what you think is right versus wrong, is all tied up in what everyone else believes it to be, right? So this is where people want to just fit in. This is where you just want to be like everyone else. And this is also the state of awareness where you don't want to step outside of the box. You don't want to color outside of the lines. Okay, so this is like just toe the line, get in line, head down, do your thing and follow along. Don't cause any ripples, don't cause any waves. This is the consensus stage of awakening. All right. The next stage of awakening is called the individuated stage of awakening. And this stage is ruled by the planet Uranus, which, if you guys know anything about Uranus, this is about rebellion. This is about breaking free. This is about liberation, revolution. And so if you haven't guessed already, this stage of awakening is where you start to break away from the consensus. This is where you desire to rebel, to liberate yourself against the consensus state. And your evolution is occurring away from everything that you believed to be true, everything that you knew, everything that you identified with as a whole of your own society, the country you were born in, all of that. So this is where you start to discover what it means to be independent. This is where you start to say to yourself, I'm going to think for myself. And you will also, when you're in this stage of awakening, you'll start to feel very differently than everyone else. You're going to start to feel like you don't belong. And you may even feel so much that it's not that you don't belong maybe to your friend group or maybe just to society in general, but you may even start to feel like you don't even belong in your own country. This is where you start to have an expanded awareness of like basically larger frames of reference. So before it was just really isolated to what everyone else wants you to think. Now you're like starting to question everything. This is where you start to question, who am I? Is this real? Is this reality even real? You know, you just start to question the meaning of life. All those really big existential questions start to come into play during the individuated stage of awakening. And you no longer identify as a soul with the consensus state. Now, this is where you also will begin detaching yourself from society because it gives you the perspective of being on the outside looking in. And this is important because it's really hard to really see things for what they are when you're fully immersed in it. And so part of the reason how the soul evolves and the reason why we go through this detachment phase is so that we can get that outward looking in kind of perspective. Okay, so this is all about you're going to start to experiment, you're going to start to question everything, you want to independently think about things, and basically this leads to an expanded state of consciousness. Now, the final stage of awakening, which again has more stages within it, is the spiritual stage of awakening. And this one is ruled by the planet Neptune. Of course, Neptune is all about our connection with God, with Source. It is our desire to unite with all that is. It's our desire to be in union with Source and God connection, union with everything that in creation. And so the root desire of this stage of awakening now moves into I need to know and unite with all things universal. So not specific to your own society that you originally were born into, the country you were born into, and not now even the rebellious states of individual thinking and all of that. It's now about I need to be united and I need to know everything that is there of all that is. This is where your consciousness really begins to expand way out into the cosmos, right? Like you going well beyond this reality, which is very Neptunian. And this is also where you start to see everything as although there is a drop in the ocean, although you know you are a drop in the ocean, you also know that you are the ocean within the drop. And so it's this above, so below kind of thinking and knowing that even though you're an individual, you are a part of everything. So this is also where the ego as a subjective, like your own identity of who you are in this lifetime, starts to move towards soul identity, which means you start to have memories of who you always were. So memories of past lives, memory and beyond this planet, okay? Like you start to encompass you as an entire soul being. This is also where you start to experience your eternal self. Your inner experience starts to encompass the entire universe, okay, within your own consciousness. And you also start to play with the interface between the manifest and the unmanifest. And so really it's like, oh, okay, so there's this unseen world and then there's this world. It's like this idea of what's the dark matter that no one knows anything about, even though the entire universe and our world is predominantly dark matter, but no one knows what it is. So you really kind of starting to play with that idea. And then you really start to identify. So in the consensus state, you have all these rules, right? Saturn is giving you society's rules. There's all these rules. And then of course you go through breaking the rules as a rebellion and individuated. Now you're starting to align with all of the natural laws of creation. Okay, you're really starting to understand what those natural laws of creation are, and you start to understand what it means to reset into the flow of all things. So those are the 3 stages of awakening on a whole, but now we're going to break them down even further because you actually go through different stages of evolution within each one. So with the consensus stage of evolution, the first stage is when basically the root desire here is the soul wants to get ahead, right? And in the first stage of awareness, souls here are just really understanding that, this tends to be, souls in this stage of awareness tend to be in the lower strata of society. They tend to believe that they just need to do their work and get it done. And again, toe the line. It's like go to work at 9, finish at 5, go home, do this and repeat. Like, it's just this kind of like, let me just do it all. Now, there's also this very limited state of awareness of time and space. So really believe that you're totally held within this time and space bubble. Whereas, once you get into higher states of awareness, you start to realize that you can go well beyond the time and space bubble. Now, interestingly enough, people who are, or I should say souls that are in this stage of awakening, are very self-righteous in holding up the values of the consensus. So they'll, if it's a certain religion or if it's a certain society, whatever it'll be, they'll be very, very tied to that and will uphold it no matter what. It's almost like these are the people that are kind of like the social automatons, what was the term that was used, which is it's kind of not nice, but what was it like NPR or NRP, like those people in the background of video games, like they're just kind of there to fill the space, kind of, so to speak. And this isn't like to put anyone down who's in this stage of awakening. Let's face it. We've all been there. We've all had to evolve from that stage. So people who are there are likely younger souls, okay, that are trying to move through this evolution. And it's really difficult for people in this stage of awakening to, which is really still a stage of sleeping, so to speak, but it's kind of there, is to really separate themselves from the group think, from the group mentality, from this consensus, needing to conform. So that is the first stage of the consensus awakening. Now, because the root desire is to get ahead in this particular state, eventually what people will become aware of is that they'll look outside and they'll see, wow, there are people who have more than me. There are people, and when I say more, I mean more materialistically, more status-wise, more power, okay, more respect within society. And so what the person starts to awaken to is, wow, I want more of that. How do I get a piece of that pie, right? So you want more from society than just being in that lower strata. So this is where you get into more of the middle strata of society. Your perception is basically here, wow, there are others that have more than me. And you want to look at maybe having more social freedom, having more possessions, things like this. Anything that is of a grander nature, right? This is what is inspiring the soul to evolve from this state. This isn't a bad thing. This is a natural progression of how the soul evolves from this place. And so, in order to do this, in order for the soul to have more, the soul needs to learn the dynamics of the society. It needs to know the ins and outs of how everything works in order to get ahead. So now, instead of just following along and doing the automated things, now the soul's starting to pay attention and starting to learn more and observe others and start to learn things that, just aren't status quo. And this requires a deep expansion of personal awareness. And the person here, the soul here, is now going to understand how to use the system to get ahead. And the rules and regulations of the system become more apparent to this individual. They become aware of others. They become aware of the country that they're born into and what that means. But this is the stage where someone starts to become aware of other countries and other values and traditions and societies and possibly even religions. Now, the third stage of awakening in the consensus state, which is the final stage, is when the soul becomes aware of the upper strata of society, right? And this is the people who are in high positions, leadership roles. They have great material abundance. And so now, in order for a soul to really kind of use that root desire of wanting to get ahead, now they have to know everything about how the society works, the system, the ins and outs. They got to know everything. And they really become aware of the totality of society and, again, becoming more progressively aware of other countries and how they do things and people from other countries. Conformity is still is still very much present in this stage of awareness. Okay. You're still conforming, but, because this is where, like, even though you start to have an awareness of, okay, I'm born into this country, but there are other people in that country and they do things differently. You're still in this stage going to be like, well, we're doing it right, they're doing it wrong. Okay. Like there's still that kind of awareness and level of consciousness kind of going on. But in this stage, the soul desires to be on top of society. And eventually what happens is, in their efforts to kind of really get to the top of society, they will exhaust all of their desires to get there, only to find out that once they have everything, the meaning of life now comes into question. Is this really all there is? And we see this all the time. This is what happens all the time. People will, go for that job because it holds a certain position in society of status, or they'll go for that job because it's going to make them a certain amount of money and they believe that the money is what's going to give them the freedom, and having all these different possessions will give them some level of status. And eventually a soul can get there and be like really unhappy, right? And really realize, this isn't all there is there, right? And so this is where we now start to enter into the second stage of awakening on a whole, which is the individuated state of awakening. And so what happens is, before a soul actually moves into this individuated state of awakening, they're starting to feel like they don't belong. Like they're starting to feel that sense of alienation from the norm of things. And it's this awakening that triggers their desire to want to move into the individuated state. Okay. So how's everyone doing? Are you guys, is this kind of clear? Is this making sense to everyone here? Okay. Let me know in the live chat. And if you guys have any questions, don't feel free, drop them in there. Okay. So in the individuated state of awareness and awakening, once you kind of leave this, I'm realizing that this isn't what I want, and everything that people told me I wanted, I'm not actually fulfilled. I'm actually not as happy as people told me I was going to be. Now your desire is to liberate, to break free from all of the previous external conditioning that you've been through. And now it's time to start thinking for yourself. It's time to start exploring beyond everything that was taught to you within the confinement of what you were supposed to stay in. So now it's like time to step outside the box. It's time to color outside the line, so to speak. Now, the first stage of awakening through the individuated state is, the soul really doesn't feel like it belongs, but it still feels the need to try to compensate by belonging to the consensus, even though internally they don't feel like they belong. Okay, so they're still going to do their job. They're still going to do those things. But despite feeling alienated, they're going to appear to others as everything's A-okay. Nothing to worry about here, right? I know we've all been through this. But what will happen is they'll structure their life to be exactly like someone who's in the consensus, but deep down, they feel completely disconnected from it. All right. And they will work very tirelessly to maintain this external structure of normalcy, but that will eventually get very exhausting and very tiresome to the soul. And feeling different creates a sense of insecurity. So when you're going along to get along, and I'm just like everyone else and I'm totally normal, there's a sense of security with that. And when you start to not feel normal and that you belong to all that, it triggers an insecurity within the individual, which can at first make this person want to scramble and try to like become more normal again, like just focus on like doing the things that you've always done, and like everything will just return to normal kind of thing, but it never does. What happens though is the more insecure that you start to feel like you're living a lie in this stage of awakening. And you start to question everything, but you're questioning everything privately. You're not letting everyone know that you're starting to question everything. And so you start to read a lot of books. You may start to expand your idea of what consciousness is. You may start to take courses or attend workshops that allow you to do this. And in this stage of the individuated awakening is when you may start to fine tune your environment. Like you might seek alternative environments that will support some of these newer interests and ideas that you're seeking, because it helps you meet more like-minded individuals that you can kind of like, oh, can I say this to you? Oh, good. Like that kind of stuff. So basically in this kind of stage, the soul will progressively start to distance themselves from the consensus. And they will likely, this is in the stage where you could still be doing your old regular job, but you could also you might quit your job and just start doing any kind of job that you not necessarily feel connected to, but it's just to get by. But like you're doing this just so that you can put all your energy into discovering more about like all your new interests. In other cases, you may actually, in this stage of awakening too, you as a soul could actually get work that reflects more of your own individual identities. And so you could start to find that work in this stage as well. And this is where you actualize work that symbolizes some of your new individuality. Now, once you have come through this stage of awakening, the next stage of awakening in the individuated state is straight up rebellion. Okay. It's like, screw everyone, screw the rules. This is like all BS, like it's just full on rebellion. And now the soul is completely turned off of any idea or philosophy that has basically like come before it. Okay. Like, so anything that someone's told you, this is what it is. It's like, you're so turned off of it. You're like, I don't want anything to do with it anymore. And you basically can end up, this is where the soul can end up in what feels like a very existential void. It's like, I don't know what anything means anymore. Like, what is this? Like, is there any meaning to life? Like, it's just like a void of like nothingness. And this is where you will typically hang out with other alienated souls. And the reason why a soul will do this through this particular soul evolution is because it reinforces your rebellion state through this idea of what's it called? What I was saying before, that people tend to have like these very deeply self-righteousness. And so the self-righteousness still is there. It's just now it's transformed into a self-righteousness from the rebellious stage. Like, everyone else is stupid. We've got it all figured out, like, I know what's up. I know what's down, it's basically kind of coming in there. And that's why we tend to hang out with these alienated souls, because it helps us feel like, oh yeah, no, we're right. And it's just part of the evolutional state. Now, in this stage of awakening too, a soul will typically exhibit a lot of fear of integrating back into society, because they're just going to fear like that they're going to get like all of this new individualism that they're starting to create and birth through themselves might get absorbed totally back into society. And so there's this really deep fear of like even wanting to reintegrate with society. But it's very, very critical of, okay, so what happens here is the soul becomes so critical of society, where constantly casting judgment on others, where this is where we'll see like, oh, look at those sheep just sleeping, and going through life. They don't know what's going on. No one's paying attention. This state was very prominent during the 2020, 2021 crisis that we all came through. And I participated in this. I was totally in this state. So, I'm not going to let my ego get in the way of saying that. It's totally true. This is a stage of awakening that listen, it's part of the evolutionary process. I don't want to say there's anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with any of these stages, okay? The only thing that's wrong with it is the perception of the person who's looking upon it, thinking that one is lesser than and one is more. And it's just not that. It's just simply states of evolution. So at some point, though, what will happen is the soul will realize that this fear of integrating back into society is just that. It's simply just a fear. And once this is realized by the soul, this will actually give the person the desire to move into the final stage of the individual stage of awakening, okay, where the soul begins to manifest within society as the truly unique individual that they have become. So this is where you start to step into your true self. You start to, honor yourself. But you're doing it in a way, though, that you want to integrate with society. It's not about being like the asshole, okay? It's about like, okay, let me try and come back in, but I'm not going to try and come back in being just like all you. I'm going to still honor me. And so this is actually really interesting because this is where the soul begins to be perceived by the consensus as very unique and gifted and perhaps even talented. And this is where the soul will now have an opportunity to expand the awareness of those in the consensus state, help them evolve. And they help them evolve through integrating this gift or this talent that is perceived by the consensus state that they have, which I want to say is likely they do have this. And this is also the stage where, in the individuated state, I totally relate to so many of these stages because, I was born in Canada. And by the time I was 16, I was like, I want to see the world. I want to travel. And as soon as I stepped out and I lived in another country for 3 months, at the age of 16, 17, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many different cultures, so many different traditions, so many different ways of looking at life and approaching life and all of the things. I'm like, oh, there's so much to learn. I was like, wow, and that really sparked this desire to know that maybe my way that I've learned isn't the only way and the best way. And then there's a point where you even go, as you've traveled and you learn and you meet other people and you go through different cultures, maybe you study other religions, all of these different things, you study spirituality, you start to identify now as a world citizen. So now it's not about like identifying with one particular country. You now identify more as a world citizen. And that's what happens in this final stage of awakening in the individuated state. Okay. And although I want to say you're helping the consensus, you will still independently, and this is from an inward state, you will still stay independent of the consensus. You don't try to conform to the way they live their life. You're going to continue to live your life the way you're doing it so that you become the model for other people who are ready to see that there's other ways of living. There's other ways of doing this. And that's how you expand other people's individual awareness, is just by being the model and staying true to yourself. Now, the nature of the soul's consciousness at this stage of awakening is defined by who they really are, okay? And it's defined by the true nature of existence, the true nature of all creation. This is where you really start to embody that. And you begin to open up your consciousness to this idea of things are universal, right? There's not just one thing that's this way. There is a universal law. There is a universal consciousness. There's a universal God. It's not like God defined by one religion. There's one all-encompassing, okay? And that is when you start to be ready to move into the spiritual state of awakening. Now, the spiritual state of awakening is the most advanced state of the soul's evolution. This is what leads the soul to liberation. And the soul is now completely identified with the natural laws of the universe, the natural laws of creation, and the soul is able to use these laws, okay, with the will of source, with the will of all that is. And this is what happens in the stage of awakening when you move into the spiritual state. So in the first stage of this particular stage of awakening, the soul becomes progressively aware of how small they actually are. Like you realize, shoot, I am a tiny little speck of sand on the beach, right? Like that's where, like when you're in this stage, you realize, oh, I am not as important as I thought I was. It's very humbling. This is where you go through a very humbling period for the soul, but it's very important to go through this humbling because what it does is it shifts your center of gravity of consciousness from like the subjective ego, which is your identity of who you are in this lifetime, in this body, okay, to the soul itself, and eventually to the consciousness union of all that is, okay? So this is in this particular first stage of spiritual awakening, this is where you are committing to the desire. You have a deep, deep desire to reunite with source, to reunite with this idea of oneness. And you will likely start to begin engaging in more spiritual practices. So this is where you may start to do more meditation. This is where you start to maybe do nature walks that are more spiritual, like really allowing nature to speak to you. This is where like you might do stargazing, ceremonies, anything of that nature. You also are noticing that you want to be in service to the whole. This isn't about serving yourself. This is about serving the whole. And the tendency here is to orient yourself towards healing and the arts. So anything kind of, or even centers that are focusing on the healing arts. The core issue at this stage of awakening is that basically the soul desires to work on behalf of source. Like I am here to work on behalf of a higher power. And you become aware of what it is that you need to improve on as a soul. Like you, like in your own self, your own identity, you're like, okay, you start to really become aware of what it is that you need to improve on. And you become highly aware of all your imperfections. Okay. So this is tricky because in this stage of awakening, this is where a soul can get trapped into putting a lot of hyper focus on like how imperfect they are. And it can lead to, oh gosh, I see this all the time. And so many of you are going to relate to this. You will focus on your imperfections because it allows you to tell the narrative that you're not ready to step into the world with these gifts. You're not ready to act on behalf of source. Whatever work that you're feeling guided to do, you're not ready. You don't know enough just yet. You need to study a little bit more. You need to fine tune everything just a little more. Okay, so you need to be aware of how hypercritical you become of yourself here and not fall into the trap of too much criticism, because then that works to kind of prevent you from actually doing the work that you're feeling very called to do. This is also a time where you become extremely perceptive of your third eye and you start to utilize your third eye to see the world, to see everything. And you'll also experience various states of cosmic consciousness here. So you really start to have experiences during this stage of awakening. Now, once you have moved through that, okay, now you move into a second stage of awakening, which is where you start to have multiple experiences of things that just are unexplainable, right? Like they make no sense. People, if you were to tell people in the consensus state, they'd be like, you crazy. Like you're one of those cuckoo people. Okay. Like you start to have a lot of those experiences. You shift from, this is where you begin to, this is where you start to shift from this idea of me as the human. And okay, so for instance, I am Nicole Frolick, here in this body. And you start to move in towards this idea of like, oh, who is Nicole as a soul? Like, like all the memories of all my lifetimes. But you don't, in the second stage, you don't quite transition fully yet there. You're kind of oscillating. You're kind of like on a seesaw going back and forth. And the problem with this, and we see this all the time, okay, is that the soul can actually feel more evolved than they actually are because of this. So they haven't fully made the transition, but they're dipping their toe, right? Dipping the toe, coming back, dipping the toe, coming the back. And so this is where we see people, okay, where they start to believe that they're more evolved than they actually are. And this will be translated in a way where the soul projects themselves to others as, like I have this mission to fulfill on the behalf of all of you and the world. I am here to be your salvation. I am here to save humanity. Like that's why I came here, is to save the planet Earth, hey, I've been there. Okay. Like I really went through this stage of like, yes, I know I came in here to be a badass light warrior, to save the planet, to save others, and eventually you get to this realization like, wow, that's really egocentric. And these are when the egocentric impurities really need to be purged in this stage. You cannot get to the final stage of that awakening within the soul if you still hold on to those impurities of the ego. Now, this can also manifest in people who will point to themselves. Okay, so for instance, I could be a leader who has gone through all these different evolved states of awareness and soul evolution. And now I'm coming across as and believing like I'm the middleman that you need to connect with to source, to God. Okay, and we see this all the time. Basically, people are really good salespeople of peddling themselves as the hook to knowing God, to knowing source, to knowing all that is. That if you follow me, I will get you there, as opposed to, like, I'm just here to show a way, I'm just doing it my way, but I'm just here to show a potential path, So eventually what the soul needs to get to is a realization of these egocentric impurities that need to be purged. And once the soul starts to purge these very egocentric ideologies and ideas, they start to go through this guilt of like, wow, I actually went through that. I did that to people. And they start to realize how wrong they were and the downfall of that. And so they start to create through this own guilt, like their own downfall, so to speak. It's a very humbling experience. But basically what this does is it allows the soul to enter into the final stage of awakening. And this is where the soul really starts to identify itself as an extension of source. It is an individual, but it is an extension of source. And its consciousness is centered within the actual soul itself. The focus here on this particular stage of awakening on the spiritual state is to eliminate all desires of separation that the soul may still have. Okay, so you're starting to look for like, where do I separate myself? Where do I still feel like I'm, maybe not good enough, or all those kinds of things. And you can also, in this stage of awareness, perceive yourself as a manifestation of source. You see that you came from that, all that is, like, you understand that. And what happens because of this is all your beliefs and all of your responses to life around you are attuned to that perception that you come from all that is, that you are a part of source. And the soul at this stage of awakening inwardly really feels and knows that it's here to serve source, God, goddess, okay? And I'm not talking about the universal God, goddess energy. In some kind of capacity. You understand that you're here to serve that energy on some sort of capacity. You are not satisfied with just living for yourself. You are living for something higher, something more meaningful, something that has way more purpose than just serving your own personal needs. And what happens here too is you structure yourself and become structured in a way where you want to give to others. Like, you're motivated to give to others. And I want to make this clear, not from the state of being a martyr, okay? But just understanding that you have no ulterior motives. You just understand the joy of serving others on behalf of source. And there's just this radiance that comes from you as a result. And the nature of your work when you're in this stage of awakening is almost always has to do with some level of teaching or some level of healing. And what happens here is the soul begins to radiate this energy that is very attractive to a lot of people around you. They just like gravitate towards you because you're radiating this fundamental wisdom. You're radiating this natural compassion for humanity. And people start to feel that and they're gravitating towards you. It's also, I want to say, what also people find very beautiful about you in this part of awakening is that there is a humble aspect that you embody, and it's not anything that you're trying to do. It's just natural. It's just exuding through you, and people find that very interesting. Now, what this is like, okay, so in that stage before this is where we saw where you could have those egocentric impurities of a leader of some way and saying, I am the way, right? I am the way to God. I am the way to source. In this state of awareness and awakening, you are now pointing the way home for people. You are not pointing towards yourself. You are pointing to the way home for a soul. And this is key. This is really key. Now, the downfall of this stage of awakening, which I'm sure some of you can completely be in resonance with, you're probably going to identify with, I know I can identify with this, is that when you start to come into this stage of awakening to some capacity, people will project their own judgments onto you because you start to threaten their own identity. Your light is so bright that it actually starts to threaten them. They feel threatened by it. And so what they'll do is that they'll project their own judgments and criticisms onto you because your light is actually exposing their own egocentric impurities. And it's not that you're trying to do that. This isn't about like you pointing the finger or anything like that. This is just simply about like you being you. But what happens is people like start to feel threatened, and of course their own identity starting to be completely put into question. And so what they need to do is they need to project it onto someone else and what they don't like. It's like this idea that, someone who's of a higher vibration can sometimes feel like nails on a chalkboard to someone in a lower vibration. Now, in the beginning, I want to say that this is just part and parcel for the package of like stage awakening. We can see this through some very well-known leaders, past leaders in our world that had this. I mean, Jesus went through that, right? Jesus went through that. And so what will also happen though is that Eventually, in this stage of awakening, souls will start to work with smaller numbers of people, really kind of local communities with their work. So they're just going to be working with a few people, and this is what they're destined to do. They start to like fulfill their destiny with just smaller groups of people that are close by, right? But eventually what happens is you evolve to larger circles of people, larger communities, because the nature of your work on behalf of Source is increasing. It is growing. And so naturally, you're going to start to work with larger groups of people. And eventually, as this work increases on behalf of Source, you could get to a stage of worldwide recognition where you could even be remembered by others, even after you've passed away and gone on into another life. And so these are the different stages of awakening. Now, what's interesting about all of these stages is that I feel like you actually can embody multiple stages at the same time. And I do feel like it's possible to slip momentarily into, like, almost devolve, so to speak, into other states of awakening in order to maybe kind of wake up, okay, which is kind of funny when you think about it. But that's kind of like the way I see it. And I think that you can be at different stages of awakening and not fully embody it. Like, for instance, I can resonate with all of these states, to be quite honest. I can see myself in every single one of these stages of awakening. But I can also see that there's moments where I can see that I'm embodying maybe one more than the other. And that can fluctuate, right? And so I don't believe that, and I think it's really important, and it can be a really difficult concept for our human mind that is designed to be very linear, to look at things more non-linearly and to understand that we can encompass certain stages of this in different areas of our life, perhaps, okay, that can happen, where you could be really maybe awakened when it comes to your health, but maybe not so awakened when it comes to your relationships, or maybe not so awakened when it comes to your purpose yet, or vice versa. Or you could be like really kind of more awakened. I feel like the body is the first stage of awakening because it's the physical, right? It's the manifest. It's so tangible. And I think that's what the beautiful gift of our actual vessel is that it's designed to kind of jolt us through this soul evolution, sometimes through discomfort, illness, disease, things like that. So these stages of awakening are really important for us to all understand. It gives us some context, and it helps us understand that within each stage, there's not perfection, right? There's imperfection in everything. And that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're better than if you're more awakened. It doesn't mean that you're less than if you're less awakened. It's just simply a stage of soul evolution. And, if you're a soul that is at the liberation stage, right? You're ready to liberate yourself. You're at that final spiritual stage on a whole, like on every level in your life. And that perhaps it's like on your next lifetime, it's time to maybe move on from this planet and go to a new planet. You likely are going to start at the bottom, okay? I'm not necessarily, because I can't pretend to know exactly how it all works, but I could, if I were to guess, if I were a betting woman, and I play poker, so I am, I would say there is a likelihood that you would have to start at a more dimly evolved state and start at the bottom and move through the awareness of whatever that world, whatever that experience, that existence is meant to bring forth. Again, I don't know how it all works. I'm sure there's caveats and exceptions and all of that, because there is here, so there's got to be out there. So anyway, I feel like understanding these stages of awakening can be very helpful to understand to where the pitfalls are, how to navigate them, also to have more compassion as a human for all that are here on their own journey, and to understand too, like, especially in that stage of spiritual awakening, where, you can, feel like the way. And it's like you try to tell people, like, this is the way to God. This is the way to, liberation of your consciousness. Like, this is the way to connect to source. Like, it's like, again, it's all about pointing the soul home, right? It's about, that's all that we're really here to do, but we're not to go out of our way to do it. You are just meant here to do you. You are meant here to be you, to live your life, to experience what it is that you came to experience. And you are just meant to be a model, and let people come to you and ask. Let people observe. I feel like that is the most powerful way of being a teacher on this planet. But also to understand, I want to say, because this has come up in different client sessions, is that when you are in the individuated stage of awakening, and again, you could be in a more evolved spiritual state in one area of your life, and you could be in a lesser stage of awakening. When I say lesser, I'm just using that as a hierarchy, just because that's just how our minds work. I don't mean that it's less than. But you could be in a different, less evolved stage of awakening in other areas, where you could, for instance, be in that individuated state where you're like, screw society. I don't want to be a part of it. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stick to myself. I'm going to live on a rock or live under a rock, and completely detach. And there's nothing wrong with that. But eventually, if we're looking at what the soul evolution actually is, eventually you're meant to get to a place where you recognize that you're here to serve on behalf of source, and you're meant to serve the whole. And that doesn't mean, again, that you become the martyr. It just means that it's so often that we see on the spiritual journey that we can move into hermit mode and stay in hermit mode. But by nature, we are social beings. I want to tell you, your health on every level, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, needs others around you. You need the support of others. Without it, you will start to shrivel. You will start to lose color. You will lose your vitality. Okay? And the mission here is to experience everything that you came here to experience, and to integrate into the society in a way that is true to you, in a way that honors your own individual self, soul, I should say, that still understands that it is connected to the whole. So let me know if you guys find that this was helpful in any way. Because I feel like this is important, and I really enjoy how, when I learned all these things and laid it out, I'm like, God, this just really helps put things into context for people. So Stephanie, you're saying, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Jennifer, you totally get this. Dots, it resonates big time. Every day is a school day. Yes, every day is a school day. Saint Eric, it sounds like you keep talking about me without mentioning my name. I love that. Infinite Supreme Being, Light Body Awakening 666. That is a very long name you've got there. Humans aren't special. You just think you are. Humans are special. They're just no more special than anything else. We're all special. If bees died, everything dies. Guys, I hope this was helpful to you. And, share this with anyone that feels, like they're going through something, because I feel like this, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but I feel like this is laid out in a way that makes sense to anyone, at least within the context of where they may be in the moment given the state maybe before them or after them, where they're at the very minimum, which is important because all you need to know is what's the next step, it's you don't need to know where the end point is, so to speak. Although as you start to move through this, it does become helpful. It just can definitely become overwhelming. So share this with anyone who's going through. I think these stages of awakening are important to understand for our own growth and to understand, where we can get stuck. And that no matter, how evolved we think we are, there's always more to learn. And the things that we thought we knew were right are eventually, turned upside down, and we realize, oh, I didn't have it all figured out. So it's always good to keep a percentage point within your state of consciousness of emptiness, so to speak, so that you leave room for being wrong. Okay, it's always good. And I find that the more we go through this journey, the more space you leave for being wrong, because you realize there's a high likelihood, there's almost a guarantee, that you're wrong in some capacity. So I'm going to leave it there. And remember, guys, if you're interested in coming to the Forbidden Journey retreat, it is in 5 weeks today. Tickets are almost all sold out. I am happy to announce that. So if you are thinking of coming, please reach out to me. The link in the description below to reserve your ticket is there. If you have any questions, email me, Nicole@NicoleFrolick.com. If you want to work with me, I am in the process of designing actually 2 new services. One that was going to really help you understand your soul. It's going to be based off of the Forbidden Journey kind of program, but I'm kind of looking to try to create either an actual service or a package of services that we can go through that really helps you understand how to understand what your fears are, what's holding you back, what your strengths and talents are, your purpose, and then how to create the blueprint to move you forward and actualize your purpose and your destiny and everything that's going to ultimately fulfill your biggest dreams of happiness here. So keep an eye out for that. I might have that organized within the next couple of weeks. We'll see. And other than that, guys, I love you so much. Have an incredible evening. I am off to play on an amusement park, an old school amusement park, like super old school, almost to the point of like, I don't know if I'm going to come out alive. But they're doing this 90s theme, one night only, adults only, kind of amusement park thing tonight, glowing in the dark, all this kind of stuff. So my inner child was like, yes, we need to go to that. I was like, yes, we do. I'm buying the ticket. So that's where I'm off to now, to go play and ride on roller coasters and win stuffed animals. All right, guys, I love you so much. Have an incredible evening. And if you're interested in joining Alchemy, okay, if you're looking to find some of your tribe, come join us. We'd love to have you there. We've been very active. You guys have been very active in Discord lately. Loving the conversations. I got to jump in there soon. I've just been super, super busy. There's so much preparation leading up to the retreat and everything. So if you're interested in joining Alchemy, link for that is in the description below as well. All right, guys, I love you so much. Have an incredible evening.